Elaine Low here after the Anklers Business of Entertainment panels at the NAB Show in Las Vegas. We've got a great conversation here about the boom in everyone's favorite old-school TV format, the procedural. I spoke to Fire Country co-creators Joan Rader and Tony Phelan, plus CBS executives Yelena Chak and Bryan Seabury, who told me all about the real-life inspiration behind the show, shared their process on developing new series at CBS, and why it all comes down to character-driven stories. They even gave me a little peek behind the curtain of their new show, Sheriff Country. Here's what they had to say. Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Elaine Low, staff writer at Series Business, a newsletter from The Ankler that covers all things about the TV business. We do a deep dive every week into market intel, what's buying, what's selling, development, and all the things you need to know to be part of the entertainment business, which is why I'm so excited about this panel today about the boom in procedurals. Everybody's got a favorite, your favorite crime show, your favorite medical show. So we're going to chat today about why this format endures. And to join us here today, we have Bryan Seabury, the CBS Studios Head of Content Strategy and Drama Development. And next to him is Joan Rader and also Tony Phelan, co-creators and executive producers of Fire Country and Sheriff Country. And Yelena Chak, CBS Entertainment Head of Scripted Development. Give them a warm welcome. All right, so Fire Country, now in its third season, renewed for a fourth, premiered in 2022. The show started off with a young convict who is in this program where he works as a firefighter in order to reduce his prison sentence. We're in his hometown in Northern California. We get to see the family of firefighters he comes from and all of the personal and professional drama that ensues. Tell me about the inspiration for this show, because it's inspired by a real life story, right?
Yeah, this program of having inmates fight fires is real, and we didn't know that when Max Terriot, who is the lead, he plays Bodie, came to us, and he's from this town, Occidental, in Northern California, that is sort of a fire town. Like, a lot of the people are firefighters, and so he's grown up with them all his life, and in the town is also what's called a con camp, a conservation camp, that has inmate firefighters. And so the story of redemption, of showing these inmates really getting a second chance, was really inspiring to us and has been inspiring to our audience members. Everybody can relate to redemption stories and the need for second chances, and so they've really been open to it.
Is this a story that you think you would have normally pursued if it hadn't been inspired by a real life story?
Well, I think that the other thing that drew us to the story was the fact that it was set in a small town. And so many procedurals and shows are set in big cities. And what we like to say is that the show is not aspirational in terms of wealth or clothes or money. It's aspirational in terms of family and community. And that, I think, has really resonated with people.
But also, when Bruckheimer TV and Max came to us with the idea, we instantly, Tony and I were like, I don't know if we're your fire show guys. And Christiane Reed at JBTV, I sort of said, no, thank you, maybe another project. And she was like, I reject your rejection. You must hear the pitch. And then we heard the pitch, and I was like, oh, damn it, we have to do this. It was a show. Like, I just knew that it would be good.
And Bryan, tell us a little bit about the development process behind this show.
Yeah, you saying you knew it would be good is because of what you and Tony knew you could bring to it, right? I think that if it's writers who don't focus on character in the way that you guys do and think about it through that prism, if you're just going to lean into only the fire of the week and that's why you think the audience is coming to your show every week, there probably isn't much of a show there. I think it comes down to Tony and Joan going, oh, what an incredible backdrop for our characters. What an interesting world. Who would be drawn to this world? And now let's start to get in there and see what their sort of interpersonal relationships are going to be. I think that's what made the show come alive and why people come every week.
And, procedurals are just such a staple on CBS. Yelena and Bryan, I'm so curious to hear sort of how you approach it, right? Because so many of the procedurals that you have that do gangbusters numbers, between Watson and Tracker and Matlock, they're all very different and distinct on their own. So tell me a little bit about how you think they all sort of fit in holistically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us, it's always about starting with the character. It's never about what's the new way to solve crime you haven't seen before or what's the organization you haven't seen before. For us, it really has to start with the character, which is why these two are particularly great at creating such hit shows for us. But, they're all distinct and different because they all have a unique point of view. They all have something to say. And that's what we're really looking for. It really has to start with the creative and the characters at the center.
Sort of rarely starting with the procedure itself in the development of it. I think we're much more character driven and character forward now than we ever have been. That's just been part of the evolution of the procedural. But I also feel that it lends itself, a CBS audience in particular, I think they know that we design these shows to go the distance. If you have a lot of choice in television.
As in, they're multi-season shows in mind.
They're built to have long seasons, right? They can be 20 episodes in a season, and you can get multiple seasons out of them. And that starts, I think, from the beginning for how you design the show. Other shows, of course, they're limited. They're designed in a different way. Here, the questions that we ask in a pilot are much more open-ended, and hopefully you're planting seeds that go for seasons and seasons. And the audience, I think, intuits that when they come to a CBS show at the beginning. Is this sort of built to go for many seasons?
Which is so interesting because so many shows don't go for very many seasons, especially in this streaming age. I mean, at The Angler, we talk about this all the time, right? About how, the streaming era has so thoroughly changed the way the entertainment industry works. Joan and Tony, does it almost feel like a luxury to have 22 episodes?
Oh my God, it does. Because think about it, if you have 8 episodes, you want to really let the audience into the interior lives of your characters, and to have 20 episodes to do that is amazing. For a while, you can focus on these characters over here, and then you get mid-season to go deep on another character, and it just makes the whole show richer, I think.
Well, and it's also, I think the audience responds to it because with 20 episodes, you, as an audience member, experience that these people are in your living room every week. And they become a part of your family, a part of your life going on, and you see them ideally grow over time. And that, I think, is very powerful and allows us to tell stories and to push the boundaries of our storytelling in a way that just doing a one-shot, 8-episode event doesn't.
But also, think about it. If you're somebody who is an inmate in a fire camp, for instance, and we want to see them grow and change, it's just not realistic that they would do it in 8 episodes. People make progress, and then they backslide. And so we really get to show the authentic story of these characters. I think with 20 episodes, we get that.
And, the development cycle has changed so much too. Instead of a traditional pilot season where you're making, the first episode and then trying to figure out if you're going to order it to series from there, now it's, you've got so many different ways of doing it. You've got pilots, you've got, planted spin-offs, which, we'll talk about Sheriff Country in a little bit. And at CBS, it's basically just year-round development right now, right? Like the old school way of doing it is gone.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, we've definitely, evolved over the last few years. We're very much doing year-round development. That means we're hearing pitches any time of year. That means we're buying projects any time of year. And I mean, that makes sense. There's no reason why, good ideas should only happen in this particular few months of the year. So part of it is just, it doesn't make sense to kind of stick to that timetable anymore. And so we've got projects in different phases, and we're taking very much a bespoke approach to the development. And instead of just sort of one size fits all, now we think about what is the right next step for each individual show. So for example, with Sheriff Country, which we're going to be premiering this coming fall and are so excited about, and it's obviously an expansion of the Fire Country universe. But in that case, we were able to see the character of Mickey, played by Morena Baccarin, in an episode in season 2 of Fire Country, and got to see, how audiences responded to her, how, wonderful she was in the role. And so, it made it easy for us to make that decision to be able to go straight to series in that case. But then we have other cases where, the right next step is a pilot still. So, we just shot a drama pilot recently. We have a couple comedy pilots that we just shot recently as well. So we do still do pilots as well. And then there are some shows where, it's a slightly different approach. We've done development rooms so we can get a little bit of material to kind of see what would the next few episodes look like before we then pull the trigger to go straight to series. Our most recent medical show, Watson, is an example of that. So whatever makes the right sense for that show, it's the right next step for the right project, a very much a bespoke approach.
Yeah, it's so much more varied now. But I mean, for anyone in our audience who doesn't come from the entertainment industry, I mean, like Bryan, walk us through the old Hollywood way of like, what did pilot season look like before?
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, the beginning part, still remains. A pitch, you love the show. After the pitch, the writers write that pilot script. So that part still remains. It's from there forward now that we have a lot of different ways to push a particular project forward, again, in that sort of bespoke approach for each, what's the best way to move each project forward. It used to be, yes, you had pilot season, so you got in all of your scripts, the network would select, say, their top 8 dramas and 8 comedies, and then you would go off and shoot all of those at the exact same time. And then at the exact same time, the network would view all of them. And this is happening across town. And then everybody would roll out their schedules that May at the upfronts. And it's just not like that anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting. And streaming has changed so much about the industry, including pilot season and development. Like, what else has it changed for you all at the broadcast level?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's changed sort of how we approach development. We're now thinking about sort of that multi-pronged strategy. A show now, we're looking at not just how it does on broadcast, but we're also looking at, how does it do in delayed viewing in broadcast? How does it do in streaming? How does it do in the international markets? So we have to see how it's doing everywhere. And I mean, a show like Fire Country is just such a wonderful example. When that show originally launched, it did great on the broadcast network, but then, a little while later when we got to see the delayed viewing numbers and the streaming numbers, I mean, then we really knew we had something special. Like, we had a tiger by the tail there because those numbers, it was the same season as Ghosts, and both of those shows had such strong streaming numbers that really told us a lot. Then shortly after that, we did a Netflix run of season 1 of Fire Country. We were thinking about that as sort of a promotional marketing tool to...
Yeah, tell us about the Netflix effect, because we see this with so many other shows, right? Like, people sort of discover their new favorites on Netflix frequently because, I mean, like it or not, like, it's the default streaming service now. But, like, you have, like, so many people who then take their viewing elsewhere after that once they've discovered this great new show that Netflix has licensed.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we used that as a promotional tool, and it worked great for us. People found it on Netflix because it's just a testament to how strong the show is. Whatever platform we put it on, people found it, they loved it. So the people who found it on Netflix, they watched the first season there, which then drove them to Paramount Plus to watch season 2, which then in turn drove them back to CBS Broadcast Network for season 3. So it brought people right back to our ecosystem. It was a great tool to introduce new people to the show, but it's just because the show is so strong that no matter where we put it, people found it.
Yeah.
By the way, when it premiered, I gathered all the writers. It was going to premiere the next day. We gathered them, and I said, look, the network has expectations for it. We're not going to meet them. Just prepare yourself. You've done a great job. You're worthy. Like, I gave them the coach speech, and then the next day it premiered better than everybody expected. The next week, the second viewing, I gathered all the writers. We had a great premiere, okay? But it's going to go down. So there you go.
Great pep talk. Keep the bar low.
But that used to be all that you had, right? Years ago, you would only have that network premiere, look at your numbers the next day.
Right.
And now this sort of multi-platform approach of being able to see what it does on CBS, what will be that delayed viewing, what will happen with it on Paramount Plus. Later on, you drop, a season 1, as Yelena was saying, a year after it had premiered on CBS or more, you drop all of that on Netflix, and the results can be great. I think that we dropped it in August, Fire Country, that season 1, and I think the the sort of astounding stat there was in that month of August where we dropped season 1 on Netflix, just between Netflix and Paramount Plus, that month, 3 billion minutes of Fire Country were viewed. I mean, this just speaks to the reach and when you have a great show.
Yeah, and since then, I believe on Paramount Plus, it was a 4-time factor viewing is what the Fire Country streaming numbers, jumped by. So it was really effective, yeah.
And Tony and Joan, I'd love for you to be able to speak to sort of the creative process as well, because I mean, in this environment where in 2022 there were 600 scripted shows out there and sort of the peak of peak TV, I mean, you had beautiful, wonderful shows out there that sometimes, unfortunately, didn't resonate with viewers. I mean, like, how do you approach that challenge creatively when you're launching a new show?
I think you just try and keep it as honest as you can and identify what it is about the show that drew you to it and what it is about the show that feels fresh and new, and you try and lean into that. And so for us, it was really obviously about the characters, but about this prodigal son story. I mean, the fact that a show about a lead character who is a convicted felon, who is guilty, is pretty amazing for network television. But surrounding him with those characters who are going to help him on this journey, I think that because so many of us in our own lives deal with those issues of substance abuse and mass incarceration and how to redeem yourself in the eyes not only of your friends and family, but of yourself, those really resonate. And so that's what we chose to be the kind of core values of the show.
But also, luckily, once you pitch a show and it gets ordered, you get this very special incubation period where it's just you and the writers coming up with the best stories. And so you don't think about the people who are eventually going to be judging you. And what, you just get to focus entirely on what is the best storytelling for these characters. And I think that's really important because once you get into, as a creative person, second guessing and thinking what might be popular or what might people like, you're dead in the water. So we just always come from telling the most exciting stories. The stories that push the boundaries, that we get jazzed about, that's all there is.
Joan is notorious in the writer's room for saying things like, "It's just not awesome."
And the writers are like, "Can you define awesome?" And I'm like, "Nope."
What are the parameters for awesome? But that is interesting how basically the definition of a procedural is changing, going from case of the week, murder of the week type stories to something where you're digging into family life and people's personal relationships. And, if you miss an episode, you'll probably still know where you are, but you also sort of crave that thread that's running through them all. Tell me about how streaming factors into this in terms of the binge watch when you're able to do that.
Serialization works really well for streaming because it is sort of that kind of binge-worthy kind of ending to an episode that's just the cliffhanger that you want to absolutely get to that next episode right away. You can't wait to see what is going to happen in this personal story. So that works particularly well on streaming, we found, which again is why Fire Country also has such a strong audience on streaming. So I mean, for us, it sort of works on so many levels. It obviously works on the broadcast network and then has a younger audience on streaming that is really drawn to that serialized storytelling. I think in addition to that, Fire Country also, just in terms of the setup of having kind of multi-generational characters, is also working really well. You have some people who watch on broadcast, and then you have a slightly younger audience watching on streaming who are perhaps sort of drawn to certain characters from the younger generation.
The other advantage is the schedule that the show is made under. The fact that we do 20 episodes a season, I think a lot of streamers are saying to themselves now, how do we make our own version of the procedural? The challenge, I think, for them is that you're used to making 8 episodes over 2 years. We make 20 episodes in 1 year.
And frequently in between those 8 episodes, there's maybe a 2-year gap.
Right. So we're able to provide the streaming audience when they encounter the show on streaming with many more episodes that I think makes it easier for them to really hook in, get to know the characters, and feel that investment.
And speaking of that continuity too, let's talk about franchise building and building on that IP. Bryan, your purview recently expanded to include that, both of those factors, franchise and IP. Tell us how your role has changed and how that's changed the way you're thinking about series.
Yeah, I mean, the core of the job has to stay the same, right? It has to be identifying a new show that I think the audience will really come to and get excited about. That starts with my own excitement in the pitch room for what the show idea is, how excited I am to work with those writers. Certainly, it felt like we needed to have a sort of a defined strategic approach to how we were going to expand on existing worlds. And some of those were established long ago, as far as when the first episode of that first show came out, and now we've expanded the worlds in different ways. But also keeping your eye on, we can talk about the franchise that is Fire Country, but we also, as developers, can't lose sight that show didn't exist 4 years ago. That's an original concept that came through the door, and now we have a new franchise. So I think the main part of the strategy was to make sure that it's a multi-pronged approach to how we're going to build out our slate at the studio and then ultimately at CBS and wherever else the shows may go.
Well, and from a writing point of view, on Fire Country, we're doing a lot of stuff outdoors, wildland firefighting, and you don't get into town so much. And Sheriff Country, the sheriff, the way we sort of incorporated into Fire Country originally is Mickey, the sheriff, is related to Sharon, who is a character on Fire Country. And so we introduce her that way. But through Sheriff Country and through solving cases, we're going to get into town more and get to know the people in town in a different way. So it's just a great way to expand an already beloved sort of town and group of characters.
And I think for us too, the question became, we're going to do a law enforcement show, but we're going to do a law enforcement show in 2025. And what does a law enforcement show look like in a small town where the sheriff, when they roll up on a situation, 9 times out of 10, they know the people involved. So the first inclination is not necessarily arrest, but it's de-escalate.
Oh, gee, his mother just died. He's freaking out about that. He's a good guy. Let me talk to him. And so you get this really personal approach to law enforcement.
And tell me about the genesis for Sheriff Country. So, Mickey first appears in season 2. Was that the plan then? Or was that,
Yeah, I mean, the idea was, ideally, you want to bring that Fire Country audience over to Sheriff Country. So how do we create our lead so that she has personal relationships with the other characters? We can introduce her both personally and then in her role as a first responder and explore more of, as Joan said, the town and the community, and also how she's dealing as a parent. And this came out of our personal experience with some friends that we had. As a parent of a child who's going through substance abuse and rehab, what that does to you as a parent, how it changes your relationship with your child, and how you struggle to deal with that. So what does that look like on a sheriff who's in a town in Northern California where the primary economic engine in that town is marijuana cultivation?
And sounds good, right? Watch.
already interested? Go on.
So yeah, it's a fully fleshed out pit. I mean, it's not like you just plant a character inside a show and see if she works. I mean, we're talking about you guys coming up with a really incredible show idea. Again, a real reason for being something you were excited to write. It felt like a great expansion of that universe, something that the Fire Country audience would be excited about. And then from that point, you figure out what's the best way to launch it. And that became planting that character inside the show. But you guys wrote that episode, and then you also need to write episode 1 of what would be the first episode of this new show. So there was a lot that went into the development on that front.
Yeah, and because we were able to do that and plan ahead, I mean, that's part of sort of our long-term strategy, which has been really effective for us. And we saw Morena again in yet another episode of Fire Country 2 nights ago. And we're able to take, a long-term approach also to not just the scheduling, but the marketing and promotion. So, as everyone's been watching March Madness, we've also been able to promote Sheriff Country, even though it's not going to premiere for months and months. But that's all because, we're taking a more sort of long-term targeted approach and bespoke approach. And so we're able to sort of get ahead. And that time is really incredibly useful so that we can give the show the best launch possible in several months from now.
And the other thing, I think, too, those kind of things that happen that you don't know until you're there is in the first episode that Morena appeared in. There's a moment at the very end of the episode where Mickey and Sharon are standing there, and Mickey's talking about Sharon's family and how much she envies how she has this family that is extended, that's not just related by blood, and that people kind of congregate to her. And to see that on screen, we're like, that's the key to that character. And that desire for family is going to be the thing that drives her, both with her daughter and her father, who's a weed grower. Pulling those elements together is kind of the bedrock of Sheriff Country.
That's really interesting. And, again, procedurals are having such a moment that even in this era where we're always talking about the impact of streaming, it's like, what are some of the new shows out this year? It's like you have The Pit on Max or Pulse on Netflix. Like, these are medical procedurals. And you see these major streamers that are now looking for, at least whenever I talk to agents and producers, like, what's buying, what's selling, right? They're always like, oh, procedurals and sitcoms. And it's like, what?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we've been doing successfully at CBS for many years. So, I mean, honestly, it feels really nice. It's like such a compliment that it's, sort of being noticed and recognized to the point where people are like, oh, yeah, this actually works really well. We should be doing it, too. So it's like, what do they say? Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So, we'll take it. But, yeah, I mean, they obviously work really well.
Joan and I cut our teeth working on Grey's Anatomy, and we were there for 9 seasons. And so you do really get into a dialogue with the audience about things that you think are important, issues that you want to talk about. And because you're in this world that everybody is familiar with and has an investment in, you can really kind of grapple with some things that as writers in the room, we're like, this has just happened in the world, and we want to kind of find our spin on that. And that's what being on a procedural that has those kind of legs allows you as a writer. And it's very exciting.
As a development executive, I think that question is something that we're asking ourselves every day. I will say that it's sort of at its worst if an executive is the one trying to answer it. And it's always writers who are coming in who teach us how to stretch. When you talk about the evolution of the storytelling, it certainly at CBS, it's always been writers. It's Tony and Joan with what they've done with Sheriff Country. It's the Kings with what they did with The Good Wife. It's Ginny Erman with what she just did with Matlock. These are writers who come in and are sort of masters of their craft and talking about how they can kind of stretch all the while still being in procedural television that makes sense for CBS.
Interesting.
Yeah, for a writer to have to, for me, essentially, how do you make it seem real and not fake within a sort of very structured commercial break thing is sort of what I'm always grappling with. And when I say, you guys, it's not awesome, it usually means like, does that feel real to you? The audience it's about the humanity, and it's about showing the audiences stuff they can relate to that feels real, like at least for the work we do.
Yeah, and I asked this question about the evolving procedural because I imagine that, so much of the work you do creatively and also business-wise, you're competing for everybody's attention, right? It's all about the attention economy. So the move to do more serialized and having it be more bingeable and having people more invested. That's why I wonder if, I don't know, you ever thought of doing like a live procedural? Is that even like physically possible?
Now I am.
Free idea.
I wasn't before. Bryan, I want to sell this on stage.
Right now, the live procedure.
You guys heard it. He just bought it, right?
I get residuals on this though, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so tell us a little bit more about Sheriff Country, because that's the big thing to look forward to in the fall, right? Like, how big is the writer's room? Do you ever have overlap between two writers' rooms? Like, is that a thing that's possible?
Well, we do, because we're wanting to have overlap on the shows. We want to have crossover episodes, have characters from Fire come over to Sheriff. We want it to feel like a town, that the people know one another. So we have to do a lot of careful planning. We have a great writer's room. We're in the middle of it right now. Right?
Yeah.
Tony Phelan?
Yeah. The advantage is that we were able to do with Sheriff, start the writer's room significantly before we were going to go into production. And so we start production in about a month on Sheriff, but we will have 11 or 12 episodes already written before we start.
Is that typical or atypical for a new series?
Atypical, because usually you'll have maybe 3 or 4, and then you just spend all of your time trying to stay in front of
schedule. You're
on the treadmill.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this way, we've been able to rewrite and adjust, and that's been really helpful. But it's also finding not only the way the stories are told on Sheriff Country, but the look of the show in terms of casting, in terms of cinematography, that makes it its own distinctive thing. Ideally, I think all television creators want a show where when the audience is spinning their dial, if people still do that, and they come upon the show, they're like, oh, that's Fire Country, because of the look of it. So yeah, we're in the process of exploring that. And we're just having fun coming up with really exciting things for Mickey to be a part of while we follow her on this kind of hero's journey of being a woman coming into this traditionally male role, and how she deals with the family that she has at work and the family that she has at home.
That is something else that this year-round approach has given us for some season 1s recently, is a lot more runway before they have to start shooting.
The luxury of time.
It's been really great. It's more difficult starting with season 2 and on, but season 1, which is typically your most difficult as you're trying to find it, several of our new dramas have had more time than they've ever had before because of this a year-round approach.
And Joan and I have bought bicycles, so we can bicycle back and forth between writers' rooms on the lot, which is very helpful.
They were cheaper than a golf cart, so.
I advocated for one tandem bike that didn't. No?
Now, lightning round question for all of you to end on a fun one.
Oh, no.
If you could have a crossover of any 2 CBS shows, drama or comedy, you could mix and match. What would you want to see?
I want to see Elsbeth win Survivor. She would, all those bags on the island, filled with coconuts. She'd go to the well. She'd be fantastic.
That's amazing. Yeah. I want to see Matlock in Fire Country.
Ooh.
I don't know what happens.
Is she holding the?
She's fighting the fire. Yeah.
I love the character of Elsbeth, so I would love to find a way to bring that kind of joy and humor to the Fire Country universe.
You took mine.
An Elsbeth cameo for every show, yes.
There you go.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here. This was great. Please give it up for our guests.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.